Hello and welcome to First Geek 411's book club. Tonight we will be talking about Dune by Frank Herbert. And also, side note, happy 1 year anniversary, book club.
Whoa, what?
This is book 12. We picked a banger.
Yeah, this is quite the book 12.
Okay. Before we hop into all of that, you can find us on all the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as One Geek 411. Come join our Discord server and chat with us all the time about all of the things. Or email us at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Check out all our show notes on our website, onegeek411.com, and watch our regular podcast show on Twitch every Monday night at 6:45 Mountain Time. And find all our videos over at YouTube. Rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our Red Bubble store for our sweet, sweet squid merch. Hi, I'm Shani.
Great job, Poppy.
The squid is alive.
And with me, I have Chris.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
And Cameron.
Why, hello there.
Hi. Okay. So, as I said, we'll be discussing Dune. Disclaimer, I'm about to not pronounce anything correctly. Sorry.
Sorry, my bad.
There are words. I pronounce them in my head.
Yes.
We'll see how they come out of my mouth. Also, the synopsis for this one was so hard. This is the longest book we've read, and there's so much going on. And my synopsis hopefully will not sound completely unhinged. I just realized as I was trying to sum it up that the more I tried to explain it, the more I'm like, I don't know if I knew what was going on the whole time.
Just a classic hero story set in a futuristic time without computers. Boom.
Synopsis. There you go. Now you know what's going on.
Summarized.
Okay. But to summarize the plot, Dune centers around Paul, who comes to be known by many names throughout the story. Paul is the son of Duke Leto, whose family is in a feud with another political family, the Harkonnens, and Jessica, a woman from the Bene Gesserit, a powerful and mystical religious organization. They come into power on the desert planet of Dune and are very quickly betrayed. The Duke is killed, those loyal to him are scattered, and Jessica and Paul are forced to escape deep into the desert, where it is believed to be impossible to survive due to the harsh conditions and the giant monster sandworms. However, they are taken in by the Fremen, the desert people, believing Jessica and Paul to be fulfillments of prophecy. Throughout the novel, we learn more about the political social structure of Dune and the universe at large. The Bene Gesserit are highly intuitive, sometimes to the point of mind reading and prophecy, but also seem to work behind the scenes, planting prophecies and their fulfillments, and controlling bloodlines. The mysterious spice that is a major part of the diet on Dune, as well as their main economic product with its medicinal and mystical properties, is produced by the sandworms. And there's much political intrigue with shady dealings going on with the Emperor and rival families. Paul has very strong prophetic powers and becomes a revered leader, leading the Fremen people into war to take back control of Dune.
There you go.
Yeah, this feels like that was a good summary.
Very nice.
I'm just saying this new scene though can't capture my jazz hands. So
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna need a special jazz hand cutout.
Mini jazz hands.
Yeah, it's is it here? Is this where I have to jazz hands from now on?
Yeah.
So
sorry, I just wanted to fill up the screen and it looked good. So
no, it looks very clean.
Yeah.
It's just I just have to adjust my radical hand movements for this new scene.
All right, and some fun facts about Dune. It won the best sci-fi novel of its year, which was 1965, for both Hugo and Nebula. And as voted by readers of Locus in 1975, it was decided to be the greatest novel ever, even beating out Lord of the Rings.
Back off, Dune. 70s people had no taste, apparently. Sorry. Just saying.
It's very popular.
I mean, it's good. Don't get me wrong. But does not unseat the king.
I knew that would get you riled.
Yeah.
How
Poke the
dare
bear.
you? Who do you think you are? I am.
All right. So, first impressions.
Be brief.
Me. Chris finally read the notes for everyone. This was our pre-show
They're actually
joke.
pulled up.
I can go. This is the most Ravenclaw book out there. Like, everyone's a freaking Ravenclaw. Everyone's doing all the Ravenclaw things, and I loved every minute of it.
I mean, there's some Slytherins in there.
Oh, I mean, fair. But all the interesting characters are Ravenclaws.
Cool
We'll say it that way.
I feel like that's just life in general.
Yeah.
Strongly disagree.
For me, I'd say this is the sci-fi equivalent of Lord of the Rings, and is written just like how I like my epics. Just all story, and then you have to figure everything out through the appendixes.
Going into this, I didn't really know what to expect at all beyond sandworms. And I was very pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed it.
I definitely agree. Like, touche. I can't believe that. My biggest thing is I can't believe this was written in 1965.
Also that.
Like, just some of the things that I'm like, this is before we went to the moon. Guys.
Just saying.
Just saying.
Okay. Was this all our first time reading Dune?
Yes.
I had seen the movie, the previous movie.
Okay.
So like my dad is a big Dune fan. And so that being said, I was probably like 10. So, or not, maybe younger than 10. Maybe I was like 6 or 7. So like I had seen it, but
comprehension on the other hand,
yeah,
maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Did you remember much?
I remembered, like, I'll say like shadows. So like I remembered that Paul died / almost died, and that was how he became the prophet. But like I didn't, like, when we were reading the book, I thought that was I'm like, oh, that must have just been when he was betrayed and they presumed him dead, and then it kind of sets him up. Like I wasn't expecting like another like more dramatic coma death scene. And so it was one that like with that, I kind of remembered very limited pieces. I remember there being sword fighting. I remembered there being stuff like that, but I couldn't really have told you too much about it other than that.
All right. How does this compare to similar books? It's like, Chris, you were comparing it a little to Lord of the Rings. And anything else that's similar?
To other books or just things in general?
Things in general.
So, with how early this is written, I can definitely see like how much of the sci-fi genre has grown because of this book, or like how the sci-fi genre pulls from ideas and things from this book, and I like it. Also, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, it is a very classic hero's tale of of the chosen, of all those things, even if it is kind of set up. But it gives it's a great kind of sci-fi adaptation of like classic mythology, even. Like even look at like Greek mythology with like all the backstabbing and everything, kind of leans into that. But where it's kind of different is we don't see a lot of sci-fi actually approach religion like this, which was really cool. That was probably one of my favorite things about the book, because usually sci-fi is, well, human race has developed far enough that we don't believe in religion anymore. Almost like that's the natural development, whereas this kind of goes in the other direction. It's kind of cool.
Yep. I'll say for me, one of the things that we'll kind of I'll go more into this in a later question, but one of the things that I kind of liked about this was very much the book where like I just don't know what's happening and I'm along for the ride. And I feel like that if you can get into that mindset, I really liked the world building, because it is one of those things that a lot of it gets explained or the gaps filled in. My copy of the book actually has like a glossary in the back. I don't know if that's something that y'all's had, but like that helped. Okay, like that helped me a lot. But like it's definitely one of those things that like if you're someone that doesn't like to have something introduced and not know exactly what it is right away, like there definitely is a challenge for that. I think with some of like the bigger ideas of what's going on in the book, other parts it just like hammers in your head that, and this is what the Fremen thought was a prophecy or whatever. But like, but I kind of liked that. I like that style of world building where you don't have the protagonist asking, but what does that mean? Every time something new gets introduced.
He does it there for a bit.
A little bit, but it's not.
It plays more into his personality there
right.
than, but right, it's not like the protagonist has to know everything and understand everything.
Yeah. And it's not like Paul isn't like a point of view, like an audience like analog in the story. Like he's experiencing a new planet, but he's not like completely in a whole new world.
Right.
Like universe world system. And so I think that that's kind of one of the things that I enjoyed. Overall though, I was surprised at the fact, like one of the questions you have is like about like the sci-fi-ness. I was surprised at how little like we're not on Dune. Like it's basically just the first 2 chapters, or like, and then like literally the whole rest of the book is on Dune, and I wasn't expecting that going back in. I thought there would be more like, or I guess there are the chapters of other characters where we have their points of view. So there are some chapters on other planets, but like, I remember reading it and kind of thinking from like, a common Magic the Gathering thing is like, it's a story about planeswalkers who can walk to other planes. And so we spent the first 10 years in one place doing one story. And that was kind of how it felt for a while. Of it's like, we have this cool universe that has all of this stuff going on, and we're going to just hang out on this one planet. Which wasn't bad. It was just one of those things I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, for me in like the beginning, I don't know, it probably took me like 200 pages to figure it out, but I kept forgetting that it was sci-fi. Like just the way that like, I don't know, like the politics and like religion and stuff were being explained, it felt like a medieval fantasy almost. And then they'd be like, and then I like put on my belt that does like this force field thing, and I was like, wait, what? How? Oh right, this is sci-fi. it took me a while to remember that I was reading sci-fi. There just, I don't know, wasn't as many sci-fi elements as I was used to, I guess. Like, yeah, with we're in space, but we don't actually do like a lot of space travel or.
And kind of with that, I feel like this, in some ways, it's almost like proto steampunk, where it's like it's technologically advanced, but like the thopters have like flapping wings. Like you're not using like helicopters or even like the crawlers. Like they kind of have that very like retro like explanation that kind of like goes with steampunk, even though they're not like powered by steam by any means. But like, yeah, it's like it's very interesting how it doesn't like. I mean, Star Wars is like a decade later and is like completely different sci-fi than this book, which I think is really interesting. Also on a desert planet, but you know, we see you, Lucas.
Yep. Okay, so what was your favorite part of Dune?
Ooh, I think the Fremen funeral service was actually one of my favorite parts, or like that kind of section leading into it, like following the. There's just so many good like character elements in there, and so many cool characters interacting on one side, but then also like culminating into this funeral service that really kind of defines the Fremen culture in a sense. Just everything they're surprised about, or like how, like just really emphasizes like their respect for water, but kind of like their stoutness too, in those parts, and kind of just really reemphasizes like setting it up for what a crazy force the Fremen are to be dealt with.
Also, that funeral service like really gave me anxiety for Paul.
Oh yeah,
like I feel like that's one of the scenes that I'm just like, oh man, like we even get it from like Paul's side, but like it's just like, oh man, I have to say something in this, don't I? And like I don't know what's going on.
I knew this guy for a day and I killed him.
Yeah, and like he was kind of a jerk and like was fine murdering me, but I killed him first. Like it's one of those.
How do I make this sound respectful, but
not be like he was a jerk and had it coming?
Yes.
Like
I will say, like in that fight part though, like Jessica stepping in like right after and be like, "What's it like to be a murderer?" Just like completely humbling him right there in that instance was crazy. Like, it's like, yeah, don't get bloodthirsty. You're a murderer now. It's like, oh, thanks, Mom.
What was your favorite part, Shanine?
I don't. It's so hard.
It's a big book.
Favorite part.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's so
many things that happened.
I think one thing I really liked was, I can't remember the exact words for it, but like Paul's writing test.
The sandworm test,
basically,
like
yeah,
coming into adulthood that he should have done 8 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know. I liked because like we've kind of heard about it throughout the novel, but always coming from the perspective of people who are like, I hear that they do this, but that's crazy. Like they can't possibly do that. And so you're kind of like, maybe that's just like a rumor, like who knows? And you come at it from that perspective, and then you see it and you're like, whoa.
You want me to do what?
It was a cool moment.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those moments that gets you very excited to see it in film. Like it's very much one of those scenes that you're like, I can't wait to see them build this up.
Yeah.
I think that scene also, like in the book, really sets Paul's growth up, like him and that his power, you know, his psychic or future foretelling power, forget what it's called, kind of how he has a little more mastery over it, and like, or knows that it's not the set outcome, it is simply an outcome. And I like that too, about that.
Yep.
the reason I wanted to go last is I wanted to cheat. And so mine is basically every time someone has a plan and someone else has another plan, and then a third person has a plan, and it's just who's gonna like next level the other person. So like just like that level of like political intrigue, I found
schemes
like
within
super
schemes within schemes.
Yeah, of it's just like who is on what side, like who's actually like knows what's going on, who doesn't, like where's Paul, like what is Paul's plan here at the end, like that one scene like that kind of like stands out illustrating that is like when they I think it's when Paul has just gotten they gotten to the south after Paul's ridden the worm, and he's ready basically to admit and like be acknowledged as Duke of Arrakis, and they but he doesn't want to fight Silgar, and so they've had that whole this whole couple chapters building up that like once he rides the worm, the young people are going to make him fight Silgar to the death, and we all know Paul's going to win, and then you get to the south and he basically declares that I'm going to be Duke, and Silgar will be my regent basically as I go and do all of these things, as he eventually then becomes emperor. And it's just and then that scene ends, and then I think Paul says, just like we planned it before we started. It's one of those things of just scheme and trying to play all these people and keep Silgar alive and all of this stuff. And I thought that was such a clever, and then that it admits that's this is exactly what it was. It was just the scheme.
Just like my daddy taught me.
Yeah.
But also my favorite too, within outlining all the schemes is between the two sides, you get that juxtaposition of the motivations behind them. Mm-hmm. So Paul's point in his scheming is to preserve life in advancing this cause. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side we have the Baron and the Emperors, and theirs is just straight power control and manipulation. Bodies are just a resource.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any least favorite part?
For me, it was the representation of the Baron. I feel like it's very much one of those tropes, and it's really funny. Honest Trailers just did the classic Dune movie as for the Honest Trailer, and it's and if you ever forget who's who, just remember the good guys are good looking and the bad guys are gross. And it's just one of those things that how he is represented as a character, especially when it gets into the fact that presumably he's the only LGBTQ person in the book, and the way he's represented in that is also not represented well. It's very much one of those things that I was this feels like this part individually did not age well. Whereas I think the majority of the rest of the book did, I really feel like that characterization holds back the book. And I'm hoping, judging by who is playing Vladimir in the movie, that they will not be going in this direction.
I mean, removing the LGBT part, I understand why they portray him as gross, because he's kind of just a glutton. This is a result of gluttony and these certain aspects. So I get how that would ultimately be his portrayal, is that through his power, through his privilege and everything, this is the resulting.
Yeah, but I think, and I think for me, it's part of those things in combination. That it's and I'm trying to be sensitive as a straight bright male, that the representation of the only LGBTQ person is the villain, and is also this glutton that like goes like that presumably has not had a consenting relationship with somebody in a very long time, based on what we're told in the books. And it's just like, it's all of those things together. Like again, this is just like the way that they characterized him very much, I feel like is the worst part of the book. And yeah, it's like that he's my least favorite, not because I don't think he's an interesting villain, but because of all those things, how they all come together. And yeah, like those, reading a lot of that made me feel gross, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One of my least favorite parts is Yue being a betrayer. Because like in the appendices, it kind of goes into detail that like this is the first time this has ever happened with people of his order. It's like, what, no one else thought to like kidnap a wife and use him for ransom apparently to undo their conditioning? Because apparently that's all it took. And it's not a good explanation for why he's on the side he was, at least initially. Granted, he does do the double betrayal thing, the backstab for the backstab, or attempts to, but it's just like, oh, family bonds, no one thought to use that against these people before. Okay, in the 10,000 years of the history of this universe, it's just okay. Cool story, brah.
All right. For me, my least favorite part was probably the ending. It felt so weirdly abrupt.
Hard agree.
I think agree. And like,
that's why there's more books.
What's his face? Well, still, yeah, it's still the end of a book, and like it didn't, I don't know, we'd been building up to like this war for the whole thing, and the war lasts like 10 pages. And
Paul's a badass.
And then what's his face, the Baron's nephew, who was introduced in like the second chapter or something, like he's there right from the beginning. I was expecting him to be a bigger bad guy than he was. The first time him and Paul confront each other, he dies. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, what? Okay.
Like, I kind of felt like early on, like when we're talking about the nephew, I thought he was going to be a bigger deal in general too. But then you just don't see him actually a ton, except for like setting up like the political intrigue aspects within the Baron's house.
And even Rabin.
Yeah.
Like, does Rabin have lines in the book? Like, he's in charge of Arrakis, but does he literally ever speak?
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like all ties it. Like, it's just like one of those things of like, it felt like that was one of the few characters we were being told about that just like isn't there.
But like, yeah, I understand it does kind of build all of this into this very quick scene. But I think that's also kind of the point of like solidifying him as this chosen power. It's like, look what he can accomplish in such little time. Nothing could stand against him, kind of set up.
I think it's just the fact that it happened and then ended immediately. There was no like, yay, we did it, or like, wow, this is what we're going to do next. It was just like, we killed him, the end. And I'm like, okay.
Next.
And I feel like for me it was like, oh cool, Jessica has this very interesting line. I can't wait to see what happens in the next chapter. Turn the page, there's appendix 1. Oh, that's the end.
Yeah, and that too. Being like, we're women, we're cool. That's all we're gonna say about that. The book's over.
Next book.
History will remember us as wives. Just kidding. It's over.
Yeah. I don't know. The ending was just very weird for me. After like 500 pages of buildup, it felt anticlimactic.
I guess also one thing to consider is that it wasn't written as a solid book either. Like similar to what we were talking, like what was it? Is it Treasure Island? Like it was written in installments, much like it's actually like laid out in the book now, and then later and then assembled. Is my understanding. And then they're just like, so just, like if you think about it that way, kind of, it's like this is just the end of this particular installment, and then he went on to continue writing. But
so according to the wiki, it was originally published in 2 separate serials in Analog magazine.
Just like Treasure Island, except for Treasure Island was in that weird British children's
right, except
magazine.
This was only 2 of them, not like 10 years or whatever.
10 years and also in this weird children's finance magazine.
All right. Favorite characters?
Like everyone.
I really did. I loved a lot of the characters. I'm gonna give this one to Gurney though. Gurney Halleck. I want so much more for him, and I know there's like a lot more like pre-story to Gurney too. And like if anyone gets his own spin-off, it's Gurney. He deserves his own little book or just series. He's a very interesting character, and he's got a lot happening. But they're all great. All the good guys are great. No, I'm just
pretty much.
Yeah. Like honestly, like looking through the list, it's like I liked that character. The character I wish we would have gotten more of was Kynes, the planetologist. Like, because I really liked his political intrigue of like, is he on Paul's side?
He's on the planet side, Cameron.
Right. Well, that's kind of the thing. Is it's like it fits that character so well. Of like that he is the amoral. I'm gonna do what's best for my planet. Like I'm not concerned with like who's in charge. And so like I feel like Kynes and Cheney kind of by extension were the characters that I felt I wanted them like more background and what was going on in their lives. Like I really wanted to see more of that pre like Atreides showing up where they are more involved in what the world is, or they're together at least, like that kind of thing. But
yeah, Kynes is cool. Also, a gender swap role for the upcoming movie, which will be interesting. I'm very pro that swap.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with both of you. I think all of the characters were just so unique and well developed. And like even with characters like Kynes, who we had a short time with, like we had a lot of their character motivations and we're like rooting for them and stuff. I feel like I have to pick Jessica though.
She is awesome though. Yeah.
The Ben Gesserits are just like so fascinating to me. And yeah, she's just so cool.
You definitely need to read the appendixes because like
I know
the many Gesserits, you're just like, what?
Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Say it again.
Bene Gesserit.
Okay.
I'm going to say Ben.
Not what I was saying in my head for 500 pages, and I'm not going to remember
but
it.
Like, yeah. So the Bene Gesserits for one. So the mention of the Orange Catholic Bible
Mhm.
the OCB, was technically commissioned by the Bene Gesserits while they kind of remove themselves, but like it is a culmination of them bringing together like all the religious groups within the system and saying, and it is like a culmination of 7 years apparently, and it had a lot of interesting things happen with it, but it's crazy. And it's like, but then like going further into the Bene Gesserits and everything, they're kind of, they are this like, they're the Illuminati. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah, schemes within schemes.
Yeah,
Like,
except even deeper. It's like,
yeah,
okay, and even they didn't see Paul coming.
they saw Paul coming, just not Alia.
Well, they kind of saw Paul coming, but not. They weren't. They didn't think it was Paul. Like they did, but it's like they thought they can control their prophecy, and then they're like, "Oh, oops."
Yep. All right. Any least favorite characters besides the Baron?
I'm going to tease one for a later question and say Dr. Yue. I'll explain that more in a later on moment. But other than Yue, and kind of what we've already talked about with the bad guys,
I'm definitely going to say Yue as well, but for the reasons I previously kind of mentioned, his character kind of just, based on the world they've created, the motives didn't entirely match up.
Yeah, so I'll say excluding him for now, Duke Leto. Just not in the sense that I didn't like the character. Like, I like Leto, but he was one of the most that I was just like, everyone around you is so much smarter than you, and you're not listening to any of them. Of like, there's so many like people that could help, like, and you're just not like,
really,
you're only talking to one person. Like your wife, like Jessica is like brilliant, and he's just, no, I'm going to talk to Hawat because he's a Mentat. Like, it's like, no, like, why are you talking to Jessica about these things?
Well,
like,
I mean, part of that was his plan, though. That's part of his response to the trap.
But it wasn't a good plan.
I mean, I think like I think his plan would have worked if he had a little more time. But I think that's what ultimately happened, because his plan was to enlist and partner with the Fremen, and ultimately that's what Kynes was working on for him. And given a little more time, I think that relationship would have actually occurred. But then everything kind of just escalated from there. Like,
yeah.
with right away the trap was sprung and he was dead.
Yeah. And again, like it's one of those that I feel like the way Leto is presented is that he is supposed to be this great politician, like all of these things. Like, he's supposed to be great at like getting people to help him and making people feel welcome, but also making sure they know their place, like that kind of thing. And he very much is presented as this like benevolent force coming to the planet. And then he's like, oh, we think the Harkonnen are going to kill you. Well, I better not do anything to stop that. Like, I'm going to just talk to Hawat about it and die. Like, cool.
Yeah. But I in general, like, I think we just didn't get enough time with him or enough development also. Mm-hmm. But I do like him and his purpose in the story, kind of as the general catalyst for the story moving forward. Yeah. But that is how he's written. He's just written as a catalyst. Yeah. He just wants to rest, Cameron, okay?
I mean, maybe if he like listened to more people, stuff would get done and then he could rest. Like, solved it. Like, what do you think, Shane?
Yeah, I don't really have a least favorite. I think other than the Baron's nephew, just think he was underutilized.
Like, I wish almost they would have, like, he could have been the character that had a borderline redemption arc later on in the series instead of just dying. Like a borderline. Like, I think he probably should have just and then continued following the path like later on and then be killed. But you know. But yeah, so I would agree. He's kind of inconsequential in the long run. I swapped my knives. It's like that's his personality.
Yeah.
Oh, they think this one's the poison one.
They'll never know which
They'll
one
never
is poison.
know what happened.
There's no
now.
way anyone's ever thought to switch the poison on the blades before.
They haven't.
You're
just
so
like no
clever.
one ever thought to kidnap the doctor's wife to for them to break their conditioning.
Yep. Okay, so the narration was a bit interesting for this novel, different than anything we've done for book club before. We could see into the thoughts and feelings of multiple characters at various times. What did you think of this third person, limited omniscient narrator? Emma, who could not be here tonight. Well, she's in chat. Hi, Emma. She has read about the first third of the book, and she has some opinions and some very strong opinions about this narrator. So what she sent in about this is, why does the point of view change so much in the frame of a page? I was told you never jump mind reading from one character to another in a single chapter. I like books that change the point of view, but I don't think it was executed well here. I enjoy books that change character each chapter, but when it changes from paragraph to paragraph, it's really offsetting for me and doesn't work. Emma was not a fan.
I think a lot of that just comes down to a formatting thing. But all in all, I enjoyed the way this one was because it definitely kept me engaged. I'm like, oh well, that's all we get from that. Okay, and let me try to piece these together. Nope, I can't yet. So you keep reading. It's like, can I piece anything together yet? Nope. Keep reading. And I also think that's the reason why we got so many awesome characters, is because of that point of view changes, like like that regular interval changes for the characters, because we just got plugged into the characters, their motives, and got a better picture of them. So
I'll say for me, this is one of my favorite parts of the book. And again, like I said, this is the most Ravenclaw of Ravenclaw books. And I feel I really liked Emma's point of like I think that there is a way of telling the story where we jump basically narrators every chapter. And I think that still would have worked great. And the reason I like this type of narration is that it would have been very easy to write Paul in a way where he is the smartest person in the room. But I feel like when we are jumping through the omniscient, like especially with Jessica, especially with the Mentats, like with all of these other people who are trained to observe and plan and scheme. And like, it's so interesting to see them when it's like, in one section we have, oh, they're trying to do this to tempt Paul. Oh, he probably already figured that out. And then Paul, like 2 sentences later, is like, oh, and they're trying to do this over there. And you kind of have all these mind games going on, and you get to kind of hear like what the people are scheming in all of those things. So I enjoyed that. I don't necessarily think you had to write the story in this way, because I do think there are parts that get really like bogged down in that. But I liked that it wasn't presented in a way where only Paul is smart. So,
and I'm very happy because, like, yeah, he is smart and observant, and that's kind of related to his kind of natural talents. But also, we see so much of his struggle, like especially like when he first discovers and begins utilizing kind of his awakening moment. He's like, "Wait, what?" And he kind of realizes, like, if this is the case, and I think he refers to it as what a terrible purpose. And I like seeing that. I like that aspect because, like, while he may be the smartest person in the room, he's not always thinking about that himself, like that he is kind of does struggle with some self-doubt in areas. I guess he kind of grows into it after he, like, in the later part of the book, he's just like, yeah, I am the Muad'Dib.
Yeah, I really liked this form of narration. I think, like, with all of the intrigue and the schemes and stuff, we need those glimpses into people's minds to figure out what's going on. But, like, there's still that element of intrigue because even getting those glimpses, we don't always 100% know, like, what side people are on and things like that. I think it works really well.
And I feel like there's a degree of uncertainty with them too. Like, for sometimes they'll have the glimpse, but like they miss the UA thing. Like there's some very clear, like, and I think Hawat gets into it once he's been brought over to the Baron side, of like the idea of like the worst part for a Mentat is having information withheld from them, because then they formulate a bad plan because they're not working with perfect information. And so I feel like there's always that degree of uncertainty of like, well, are they just they could still be missing something. Then it's not guaranteed that they have the correct perception.
Like with the Mentats, like, we have bad data, so we have bad output.
Yep.
Damn it, Two-Fear. Got it wrong, okay? I know, so this isn't my favorite quote. I'm going to quote something that Jessica said to Two-Fear. Maybe. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to start saying it.
Fear is the mind killer.
No, I mean, yes, but not. I have a notepad here. Okay, never mind.
Well, now I'm curious.
Yeah.
But okay.
We'll come back to it later.
Oh, like she mentioned, like talking to Fifir about, it's like, it's not the full actual quote, but it's like ignoring the error factor in your computations. It's like, I think you're ignoring the error factor in your computations when you think someone's wrong. I'm going to start using that all the time.
I like it.
The error factor with the Mentats mentioned a few times in the book. It's like, oh, perfect. Mine stolen.
All right. So at the beginning of each chapter, we get kind of in-world historical texts / literature type quotes from the future. What did you think of these, especially in regards to world building and a little bit of knowing the end from the beginning?
Again, for me, this is one of my favorite parts. I loved this way of telling the story. And especially I loved like reading like what is the actual book from that this exists in, because like it'll tell you from whatever. I liked that a lot. I thought that was very cool. And I think it very much sets up the expectation for like that this is going to be this like pretty classic hero's journey that people will like talk about for decades to come, that kind of thing. And so I really enjoyed that. And then from the world building perspective, I really liked that, like, especially with the betrayal, like it very much takes the mystery out of it for us in terms of who the traitor is, but it leaves that room for the but why. And like, or what's going on, or like you're wanting everyone to figure it out, because we're literally told that UA is the betrayer when we meet him for the first time. And so I really liked that way of telling the story. I thought that was very interesting. Yeah, 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Intrigue. Yeah, what he said. I mean, there are parts where I was like, okay, like I kind of almost ignored him half the time. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I just want to jump back in with the characters, really. So, I mean, for me, like it was partly a distraction. And I kind of just went, oh, whatever. It is what it is, like in terms of little snippets at the beginning. But I definitely agree with, like, especially early in the book, it kind of outlines what to look for. It's like, by the way, here's a lot of events you're looking forward to. Like, oh, is this where it happens? How about now? Is this what? I did like just like pretty much the first third is just all foreshadowing and setup, and then just knock down the dominoes from here.
Okay, so Emma had some thoughts about this as well. She said, I liked having quotes from in-world text, but I wish we were given in-world context at the start of the book for them, because they felt like they were just randomly thrown in and or foreshadowing spoon-fed to the reader.
Yep.
Yep.
They are. Yep. They are.
Yes.
They are 100% foreshadowing, spoon-fed to the reader. It is very much the like, and I hadn't thought about that until I saw like her write that, and it's like, yeah, that's 100%. Yep. That's. Yeah.
But one thing I do like is that like those little snippets provide an acknowledgement that there is a large world, like this world now, and there's a lot of literature as a result. As Cameron was saying, it really does solidify the mythos that is the story that's being told. But yeah, as spoon-fed foreshadowing, sure.
Yep. And Travis in chat says, I don't think that is a bad thing, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing either. Like I said, literally one of my favorite parts is that they tell us that Dr. Yue is the traitor, and then we meet Dr. Yue. And so I don't mean to say that it's bad to spoon feed foreshadowing the way it did. But it is 100% that is what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's still one of my favorite parts of the book.
And I will also say, like, yeah, granted, it is spoon-fed foreshadowing. It doesn't tell us everything. Like, it kind of sets our expectation, but half the time, like, that expectation was so incomplete that what actually happens is better in terms of the overall story. And I do like that aspect of the story, the book as well, is that so much is like, it's like, okay, I know what I'm looking for, and then you're like, whoa.
Yeah, usually I hate knowing the end at the beginning, but I like the way it was done here, because like you said, Chris, like we don't know everything, and we also don't know like when everything's gonna happen, so there's still that element of anticipation. Like we know kind of what we're waiting for, but like, is it gonna happen now? Is this exactly how it's gonna go down? Like there's still,
and then sometimes that happens very abruptly at the end of the book,
right? And like even using that as the example, like it's one that even throughout the book it doesn't, from a meta perspective, it's pretty clear Paul's not going to die, like in the fight. But from like a in-world building, like it very much like he could have, like this could be, because it very much sets up the, I mean, he used the word jihad a lot, but like it very much sets up that this could escalate out of his control, and him dying, he could be the martyr that triggers this war across the galaxy. And so it's, even as much as it does foreshadow that the events matter, it does also open it up at least to the interpretation that it could be that this is just what people say and the myth has become more than the man, that kind of thing. Again, though, from a story perspective, he's probably not dead. like or going to die.
Like in general, he is set up as the big hero, and you know, this is early enough in terms of being written that we're not going to see George R.R. Martin takes where they just kill off any character you like. Right. Fortunately, but like it allows him to develop the character, like using things like, yeah, granted he's probably not, but he's having these premonitions, and those premonitions are a sight into the future, and he's seeing himself die. And then ultimately it's a plot device that allows him to say that he has control over this fate. Granted, he can see possible futures, and now he's playing with how to manipulate that to alter the outcome, which is super cool.
One other thing from the texts that I did not see coming in the end was most of the texts that we read were written by Princess Irulan. And then she showed up at the end. And I was like, wait, what? Like that princess?
Yeah, I really liked that. I thought that was a, like, it felt like one, like it, like again, like kind of just going back to what we've said for this, it felt like that was what it was foreshadowing, but at the same time you could also see this being something completely different.
Like it could have been like set so far in the future, like well after these, and this is like like, you know, reading text, and then you're like, oh, I agree with you. That was a fun twist.
Yeah, like I was taking them as being like way far in the future, like Paul was being interviewed like on his deathbed type thing, and there was just like this princess who was really into history and stuff.
Yeah.
Or like the princess is the Bene Gesserit that's reiterating like the history that has been passed through her lineage.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like, that's a piece that went through my mind with her. Like she's like it's written kind of from her perspective, like within the events, but it's like possibly like with all we know about the Bene Gesserit, like maybe she's like a Reverend Mother Bene Gesserit and has access to the memories and everything from her lineage, and she's actually a descendant of Jessica, or as I guess ultimately
Alia,
yeah.
And on this, like Emma has another comment in chat that I think is really good. She goes, I guess to me it's just cringy and super noticeable as someone who's getting educated on storytelling, because it feels like a big no-no. There's a good balance between letting your audience think for themselves and guiding them by the hand, and I guess it felt a little too guidey to me.
I guess also like Emma's writing from a perspective of being versed in storytelling from a film perspective, which is going to be different, like in terms of, like she mentioned earlier in chat that like it was a bad idea for like a bad pitch for a movie is how she perceived it. And I mean, like storytelling is different than books. That's why there is those adaptations and why there is creative license within film when adapting a book that we see all the time. And there are certain changes you have to make. Like I'm guessing we'll see Aaliyah be a lot older because a 2-year-old acting like an adult is going to be a little weird.
It'll be great CGI, Chris. There's no way it can go wrong. But one of the reasons I wanted to read that from Emma is like, I think in some ways it's kind of the idea of like, this is the exception, not the rule. Of like I think for every Dune that, like, again, I'll say this is one of my favorite parts. I think this was handled extremely in an extremely interesting way. There's another book where this is just like super awful.
Yeah.
And like I feel like you have to like we've talked on the podcast before about like the rule of thirds, stuff like that, and how there are times where you break the rule of thirds, but you need to know to follow the rule of thirds so that you like
Can
know the
recognize when to
1%
break
of the
it.
time that you need to break it. And that's kind of how this stood out to me, kind of reading through her comment. Like,
It's like,
know when not to do that, you or know that you shouldn't do this, so that for that very few chance, now is the time.
yeah, like I can't, like with this, and I completely agree. Yeah, this would be probably a good exception because I can't imagine trying to tell the story following the conventional wisdom of storytelling, especially because of how massive this world is that he's built. That almost this format is necessitated just by all the characters,
Mhm.
the general world, or worlds, I guess, ultimately. And like I feel like there'd just be much left desired if they weren't jumping around, if they weren't kind of foreshadowing things. And like it just, like if you weren't foreshadowing with this just because there is so much political intrigue and stuff, like I think it'd be an easy way to lose your readers. Like there's just so much happening that foreshadowing becomes super important, even if it's spoon fed.
Yeah, I agree with what both of you said. And also, I think in regards to it being super guidey, I think maybe it was in like the first third of the book. Like there is a lot like Yue is the traitor and stuff like that. But as we go on, the texts do get more abstract.
You're like, oh, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
What are you telling me,
I agree.
princess?
I think that there is a very radical shift right at the end of the first section of the book, in a good way. Not even that the first third of the book is bad, but like I think that there is a very big shift once you get into that second section. That like it in some senses, I think it does almost feel like the first portion should be one book, and then the second and third would be the sequel. Like
Which
terms
that's
of
how
like
it's written. Turns out
yeah,
that's how it
but
was
just like
written.
yeah,
Right?
but like just like in terms of like tonal shifts, like there's a very big tonal shift for that back 2/3. So
Yep. Okay. So, did you find the world and characters believable?
Too much.
okay,
So.
Dr. freaking Yue,
With the exception of Dr. Yue.
of
Here it
like
is.
yeah, so this is what I was saving for, because I feel like everything about Dr. Yue completely undermines everything else about the believability of this book. Like, not even that like Yue is a bad character. I just feel like Yue is so dumb. And like the whole premise of this book of Leto being the catalyst and all those things is predicated on the plan that Yue believes his wife is already dead, but needs to confirm that with the Baron, and can only do that by betraying Leto. And it is the and in doing this, he knows that the Baron's going to kill him.
Yep.
Like that like and again, like this is one of the times I'll say that I feel like the foreshadowing of Yue being the traitor, it's not even foreshadowing, we're just told he's the traitor, but like I feel like knowing that he's the traitor and the build up to why and what's going on, like this is the biggest letdown that I have. That, and again, like I feel like the rest of the book is consistent in its rules, except for this one thing, let alone the stuff that Chris mentioned earlier about, whoa, no one else thought to kidnap one of these people's loved ones, and that was a way to break them.
What?
Whoa. But yes, like other than that, yes. But
people in this universe don't actually have loved ones.
I'm just like, yeah, everything about Yue's betrayal like super bothered me. And it felt super contrived.
Other than that, I think
yeah.
like the way he's written this with the appendices and everything, and like that there is actually like this pretty well thought out 10,000 year history leading into these events, and following like the span of the Bene Gesserits, and like how they're this, and like how these tribes like on these planets like have this idea of how to recognize the fulfillment of this prophecy is literally one of the Bene Gesserit order, like just having, they know the older tongues as part of it. And so they just, well, they're going to come speak your old tongues. And just like, it's like, yeah, but we're setting that up. And I love, like, it's very well developed in terms of that. Yeah. But in terms of the overall story, UA is the letdown. I'll agree for sure. But the world itself is very believable.
Not enough giant squids.
But we got giant worms, so it's okay.
Yeah, close enough.
I mean, there's no water, so we can't really have the squids, so we got worms instead. Sandworms. Maybe we'll be on a water planet sometime.
I don't know. For me, I feel like the betrayal happened like so early when I was still like confused about what was going on. So I like didn't understand why he was betraying, but I also didn't understand like 99% of what else was going on. So I was just like, okay, sure.
And I think that's probably what they, like, as the author is probably like relying on. Like those chain events were so fast. It's just like, it's like, okay, he's the betrayer. This is what happened. This is why. But like, then when you sit down and think about it, you're like,
yeah,
what?
Yeah, I was just about to say it strikes me as one of the things that like when you watch the movie in the theater, you're like, oh, that was cool. And then you get home and you're like, wait a second, what? Like that's kind of how it hit me. Because like it really didn't hit me till like later on in the novel. I'm like, wait, his betrayal just like literally made no sense. Like, so yeah, it's one of those things that like I just
yeah, it's like the Indiana Jones movie. Which one is it? Is it the Ark one?
Ark of the Covenant?
Ark of the Covenant? Yeah.
The name of the thing?
Yeah. That one. I couldn't remember the Ark of the Covenant. I was like, there's a C word in there, and I couldn't think of it. Where it's like, you take Indiana Jones out of the movie, and
the Nazis all still die.
They all still die. It's just like, okay, cool. I love that. Like, it's like, okay. It also makes it a little more. It does bring a certain like analytic joy to it though too, and like realizing that, like as you get further along, there's like, pick something up that everyone else probably did too, but.
Okay, Emma had some thoughts about the world building. She says, I don't like stories that don't explain world building at all. Where Ready Player 1 and 2 had too much, this had too little. From my limited perspective as someone who has only read the first third of the book, it felt like the author spent too much time inside his own head and didn't get enough outside opinions, or did not take outside opinions for edits. In other words, it feels like the author is working with information that we, the readers, do not have. And I think for the first third of the book, that is definitely accurate. This definitely, you like are unraveling the world as you go. So you do get a full picture by the end of it. But yeah, at the beginning, you're just along for the ride.
As a fan of Lord of the Rings, I love that though.
I also love that.
Like, it's like I'm just thrown into the world and I'm trying to figure it out. And then it's like when you're done, it's like, well, there's still some things I'm curious about. And they're like, read the appendices. It's like you have to do the research. Like, I like that. And I like that when it's complete, I should say. So like we're coming from this is, the world is complete and we can go back and like now look at like all the things that came out after the story's done and everything. I probably wouldn't like this as much if I had to wait. Like, or the resources weren't available. If there wasn't a Dune encyclopedia, I'd probably be a little more frustrated. But the fact that like when I'm done with it, I can go back and start researching the weird things that I couldn't figure out. I think that's what makes this as good as it is. So maybe not as good in the late 60s. I probably would have been like, what? Now I'm like, ooh, there's a appendix in the back I could look at, or there's like all these other resources now. And I think that's a part of it for me too. Just follow the dopamine. Deep dive.
Yep. And for me, I think this is the lesser of two evils. I would, if I had to choose, I mean, of course, the correct answer is explain everything in a great way and everything's perfect. But like, if I had to choose between this, where there definitely is a lot of times where world building is not explained and it's left open, and some of it gets explained later, but some of it doesn't. If I had to choose between that and Ready Player 2, like I'll choose this type of storytelling every time. Like, and because when it's done well, it leaves you wanting more. Like, I want to know more about this universe. Whereas I feel like a lot of times when you over explain things, it just leaves like, okay, I guess. It's like eating junk food. It's like, I might be full, but I don't feel good. Whereas like, I feel like this is like, I've had an appetizer, and when done well, it's like, okay, well, now I'm ready for the main course. I'm ready to continue into what this world has.
I don't know. I really enjoyed the world building just in general, like getting pictures of like the politics and the religions and like the secret organization-y stuff going on and all of that. Like there was, I don't know, it felt like a really full world and it was exciting.
There's even like a part like when Jessica first becomes like the Reverend Mother and she receives like the memories of the Fremen. Like even like that piece of world building where it ties all the way back to Earth is really cool as well. And I really like I'm just like, ooh, it means there's this entire group of people that we can trace like the lineage all the way back to Earth. And it's like, oh, to the Nile? What? These people are like regularly in exile? What? Who are these people? I just really like that. And also like the mishmashes of the religions of the world are just our religions just combined. I thought that was cool. The way he approached language in this was fun.
Yeah. All right. Quote time.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer.
Do not.
Oh, is that yours?
Yeah, Chris, you have the notes this time. You've acknowledged that you've opened the notes.
I opened them, but then I stopped looking at them because I have my own notes to look at. And
it's
that's
literally the next thing in the notes is that quote.
Is the litany of fear? Ooh, my bad. No, I'm just joking. I wasn't actually going to use that.
There's a lot of great ones. Just for the sake of me not wanting to find and read all of them, because I didn't underline them as I went, because that would be way too smart.
Jessica had all the best quotes. Let's just
face it. There's one. It's from the like world building stuff at the beginning of the chapter, and so Irulin says, in the first lesson of all of the basic trusts. I'm sorry, I don't know why I just like forgot how to read there for a second. And the first lesson of all was the basic trust that he could learn. It is shocking to find how many people do not believe they can learn and how many more believe learning to be difficult. The Madib knew that every experience carries its lesson. This is the most Ravenclaw of books, most Ravenclaw of intros to a chapter. Like, everything's a lesson, get learning. Like, let's go. I'm in.
One of my favorites is like right after we first get a glimpse of the voice with Thufir and Jessica. And Thufir asks, "Why aren't you out destroying the Duke's enemies?" And Jessica just has like this great response. "What would you have me destroy? Would you have me make a weakling of our Duke, have him forever leaning on me?" And then Thufir tries to interact, "But with such power." And then she responds like, "This is such a great concept of what power is. Power is a two-edged sword, Thufir. You think how easy of her to shape a human tool to thrust into an enemy's vitals. True, Thufir, even into your vitals. Yet what would I accomplish? If enough of us Bene Gesserit did this, wouldn't it make all Bene Gesserit suspect? We don't want that, Thufir. We do not wish to destroy ourselves," she nodded. "We truly exist only to serve." And it is like kind of like that idea is like if the Bene Gesserit's individuals decide to just go out and about doing what they want, it's like, yeah, they can do a lot. They can really probably but also then you'd find Bene Gesserit at odds with each other, and then you're just Bene Gesserit using their powers to control people to do their bidding, and become this really weird world.
They would be the Sith, not the Jedi.
Right? I also wouldn't put them on the realm of the Jedi.
I mean, they're not, they're not either.
Right,
But,
yeah.
yeah.
But like,
But of the two, if you think in extremes like Sith do, like what she's presenting there is that they could be the Sith.
yeah,
They could rule with an iron hand. They have the power to do so, but they want to help people.
but
They
also
want to
like
help the world.
full acknowledgement. Like it's like, but the Duke is a capable person. It's like I do not wish to weaken him, especially because like there is a love there, like even if they're not technically married, but she does love him. It's like I wouldn't want him to be weakened. I want him to be in that position and to use his cunning, his abilities. It's like, and yeah, I'm here. I do have like a sense of this, but I'm not gonna go around using this power to allow him to get off easy. And much like it's like, and also like knowledge of that power is what weakens that power. It's like that power is kind of rooted in kind of a surprise tactic. It's like I didn't know them using their voice like that would have this effect on me, but if people were able to train against that and completely defeat the purpose of their training as well. And I really, interactions between Thufir and Jessica are just amazing. They're a lot of fun because Thufir's an idiot and has bad data.
Two Ravenclaws trying to out Ravenclaw each other,
Yep.
and one of them is way more Ravenclaw than the other.
Well, one
And so
Ravenclaw
she wins.
had old editions of books. Just did not have the right data set. It's like that's been updated. One Ravenclaw only watches fake news.
Okay. I've got a lot of quotes coming up in the following questions.
How many do you want?
But
No, I'm just
just that I'm like saving for answers and stuff too.
Mhm.
So if you guys stole them, it would be okay. I would just talk about them again. But one that I really liked that felt, I don't know, very applicable for the current world was said by Stilgar. And he says, "A leader, you see, is one of the things that distinguishes a mob from a people. He maintains the level of individuals. Too few individuals, and a people reverts to a mob."
I missed that one, but I like that a lot.
Found it very interesting. Just that, like, there's such a strongly connected people and like very communal and together, but still individual. I like
Kind of
it.
reminds me of the Men in Black quote, like a person is smart, but people are dumb. Go Stilgar.
Right. Speaking of great quotes, Here is the classic Dune quote. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. So let's talk about fear.
You mean, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no. That's what that reminds me of every time like it's brought up, and I hear that, or fear's the mind killer. Is like just specifically like that direct correlation to that, to Psalm 23. It was like it's like they go through my head at the exact same rate. I'm like, okay.
Okay, so was there a moment involving fear or the overcoming of fear that particularly stood out to you?
I think right before the duel with Janus, that's his name, right? That's the Fremen. Janus. Yeah. I think that one I think is very interesting because we're also getting Paul's like his visions. He's now seeing the future more, but he knows that there's patches that he can't see, and it describes like the cave as this nexus point of history because there's so many variables that he can't see them all, and kind of that fear of knowing that like there is a future for Paul, but the future is not guaranteed because so much could happen right here. And I really liked that that moment of, again, uncertainty. Like, again, because I think there's a way that you write an extremely intelligent character like Paul, super conceited, who can do everything. And then there's this of like, oh, I could die right now. Like this could just literally be the end because this is this nexus point.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorites too. The fact that there was like, it's like, yeah, I have the abilities, I can probably beat him. It's like, but I am seeing a future where I am clearly dead.
Mm-hmm.
And having to overcome that concept, that idea, and whatever. It's like jumping. Let's like think about like all the ways a fair ride can break down while you're on it, because I do not trust those mechanics. It's like, oh, I can see that door opening and me falling out to my death. Okay, I can see this hydraulic mechanism failing, but still doing it, and he still goes through and kind of overcomes that. I agree. Yeah.
One moment that stood out to me, I don't even remember exactly at what part this is, but I feel like Paul was doing something like weird, I don't know, and looking at Jessica, and she thinks she felt exposed and naked before him, realizing then that he saw her with eyes from which little could be hidden, and that she knew was the basis of her fear. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just like her watching Paul get more powerful and like, yeah, being more powerful, and that mm-hmm. like she loved him. He was her son, but she was also a little afraid of him.
Yeah, she understands the monster Paul could become. And yeah.
And we see that's like right after the murder too. It's like,
yeah,
when he's kind of almost rejoicing at his triumph, and he's like, hey, murderer. Just kind of trying to reel that in. It's like, we like fully acknowledging if possibly she didn't do that, if that little change didn't happen, he probably would have developed. And we even see him kind of like in his conceitedness later. Mm-hmm. He's kind of a dick later on.
Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's also what I'm looking forward to is like looking at Paul like in the later books and being like, someone needs to put this guy to his place.
Okay, so what does the novel have to say to us about fear? And do you agree?
What do you think, Shanine?
Fear is a construct. I'm just
Fear
kidding.
is the mind killer.
I mean, it's right there in the quote.
I don't know. I think we do see that a lot. I think some of the moments of fear being the mind killer that really stand out to me are just in the beginning where Paul and Jessica are first running into the desert, and Paul has a few moments of like panic, and that's when things go wrong. And yeah, like we know they're both very mentally capable people, and really the only times things go wrong are when they give into fear.
So what does that say to us about fear? And do you agree? As I'm stalling so I can think of my thing longer.
I mean, I feel like we're all gonna have like a very similar answers, like, or I mean, like just in general, like kind of tying probably to a future question that I'm not looking at. Like in terms of our like it teaches very something similar to, like, as I mentioned, that litany of fear is literally a theme of the book, but it ties directly, like as I mentioned, to Psalm 23, and that like fear is something that exists, but it's something to be overcome. And that kind of driving through any fear and trusting in whatever is, in this case, his terrible purpose, he's able to do great things.
The thing that stood out to me is the idea that, like, to use like the board game term, like analysis paralysis, of like the moments when so much is going on and you let the fear of what could be override taking any action. Like I think that, again, as Ravenclaw as this book is, like it very much presents that, like, here are these schemes within schemes, but at the same time someone needs to act, and there's never the like, we're gonna just chill.
Don't
Like,
ignore the error factor in your computations.
yes, there's always something happening, and there's it never felt passive in those schemes, and I thought that was really interesting, because I think that is, and I think they might hit on it a little bit with being, I think Paul might talk about it, he's like, we could just go and live in the desert and be fine, like that kind of thing. But maybe I'm just making that up. Maybe I just thought they could do that. That's something that they would think about. I don't remember. But like that idea that when you let fear like lead you to inaction, that's when problems occur. Similarly, if you let fear push you toward rushing to action, that's when problems occur. So it kind of works both ways. But just fear is the mind killer.
Yeah, like it's okay to feel fear, but you definitely don't want fear controlling you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't give in to it. Yeah.
Right. So I have felt very self-conscious drinking my water here the whole podcast. Let's talk about moisture.
Moisture.
Yes, they specifically say moisture and not water several times throughout the novel, which is why I'm saying it now. And I think every mention of moisture is very meaningful, as well as there's a lot of moisture imagery included. such as Paul being lost in waves of prophecy and things like that. So, what do you think of the use, importance, and imagery of moisture throughout the novel?
It's almost like we're on a desert planet.
One of the things that I thought of partway through this is it's funny that this is a moisture book, not a sand book. Like, sure, they're in the desert, but like it kind of reminded me of the John Christ skit where they talk about like how to write a Christian, like a popular Christian song for the radio, and they just say more water imagery. And that's kind of one of the things that was like, you know what do we need? Water imagery. Everything's water imagery. You get water imagery. You get water imagery. Everyone gets this. I liked it, but it's just one of those things that's everywhere.
I think that's one of the things that make this so believable is having the Fremen in it, like this culture that so heavily respects water due to their circumstances. I also like the setup with the Fremen where like they're hoarding water for this potential future where they can essentially terraform the planet. It's like pointing toward those types of technologies in a way, but like generations down the line too. But I like the use of it in like within that culture to show that a way of showing respect is to offer your own moisture, your own moisture, like spitting on the table or spitting, or that like as a result, crying at a funeral is such a sign of grief and respect toward the deceased because of how valuable that commodity is. And they refer to it as like giving water to the dead, or and like touching the tears of someone who's grieving that way is like a very awkward, but like it's apparently a thing you do. And I don't know where I was going fully with that.
Yeah, the crying really stood out to me as well. I have a quote. Baka, Jessica thought, recognizing the religious term, Baka, the weeper. She sensed how the symbolism of the kerchiefs united this band. Why should weeping unite them? And like we hear quite a bit about tears after that, with Paul crying and everyone being very shocked at that. And then we hear about a woman giving birth, and that the custom when you give birth is to let the child cry until they're done crying, because that's going to be the last time they're allowed to cry.
Or if you're dry crying, is that okay? Can I dry cry?
And yeah,
I also like the idea of like reclaiming water or moisture from the deceased, because it's also like as a result, like their death can, like, we can still reap a benefit, or they're still kind of with us in that sense. Yeah, moist.
Yeah. In chat, Emma says, I like how it was almost perceived like a precious metal, which, yeah, super accurate. Like when Paul and Jessica show up to the Fremens and they're like, oh yeah, like we just have cartons of water. And they're like, what are you doing with all of that wealth?
Yeah, you mean water falls from the sky on your planet? Like, yeah. I thought that was really cool.
All right. I know Chris probably has a lot for this next question. Did you notice any biblical references or theological themes?
Nope. There's literally none. This whole mean, like obviously, like the biggest thing is the idea of prophecy. Like it feels like every other chapter, it's either moist or prophecy. Like that's kind of the thing that's going on. And from like a biblical themes perspective, it's very interesting to look at the idea of the like vague interpretations of what prophecy could mean. Like where do these prophecies even come from? Like that kind of thing. And through that idea of like this is a hero story, and so like that idea of like what is that hero, what is that, I mean they go very straightforward and say the Messiah, they're the like messianic figure of Paul throughout the story. And so I think there's like those kind of heavy ones, and then it was referenced earlier, but I mean I think it's really cool. This straight up quotes the Bible in several places. Like again, it's kind of through that lens of like this combined work of like of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And like, but it's kind of interesting to see just like, oh, this is just a direct quote. And I'm sure there's some of those from the Quran that I don't know that are in here. And it's just kind of like, that's kind of cool to see very direct themes or very direct references in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, I've mentioned it forever. Also, like the direct correlation of the litany of fear to Psalm 23, as Cameron was saying, kind of. But I mean, like, what's so cool is like those prophecies exist within the cultures, and are ultimately even looking at from the Bene Gesserit history, they have tried. Like others in the past have tried to be in that position. Like other males have tried to undergo that transition, that change to be the Messiah figure. And it kind of just points to that ultimately it's like, yeah, they are doing this weird control piece where they're like sowing the seed of the prophecy. It's like, but that prophecy, like much like similar to the Bible with Jesus, is only going to be fulfilled by one person, and when the time ultimately makes sense. I'm kind of relating to even like what they say. It's like, well, it's like, yeah, if he's the true Messiah, then that will carry on. Otherwise, it'll die out, and that's all we have to worry about. Like coming from the Jewish leaders of the time, and that's kind of, as it's mentioned in the Bible, and that's kind of what's happening within this book.
So yeah, one thing that stood out to me was towards the end, I think it was Paul that said it. He says, "We Fremen have a saying, God created Arrakis to train the faithful. One cannot go against the word of God." I think I found that interesting, like, because Arrakis is such like a harsh place. I guess with a lot of testing in it to see like if you're worthy of surviving, and just thinking of that in terms of like faith and suffering.
It's very strong, just trial imagery. Like it's one of those things. It's very like, and it's not subtle either, which I think works. Like it's like the foreshadowing thing. It's like I think that this works well. I don't think it would work well in other books, but I think it works well here. That it's very upfront with like, well, this is what it's like. And Chris said it towards the beginning, I think, of like we're in this sci-fi world with no computers. Of like you look at how like the desert is presented here, versus even like Tatooine and Star Wars, where like, sure, you're on a desert and like Luke's family are moisture farmers, but like we're never really presented with that fear of running out of water, if that, like on Tatooine. But here, like it is beaten into everyone's head. Every drop of water matters. And I think it kind of just like reinforces that theme and like that idea of trials and trying to get through and growing through the situation. Like that's why the Freemen are presented so strong. It's like they have overcome challenges, whereas other people have not. They ride the worms.
Yeah. Well, also we get the direct correlation of the Fremen to the Jews in exile. They certainly develop a certain like survivability from when they were in the wilderness. And some aren't permitted, and then like even like in the history that just takes in, like they chose Arrakis because they realized they were a strong people when in a harsh space, and that they were a people that would be pushed around when they were in a comfortable space. And that's kind of like looking at the Jews move when they were admitted, like how quickly when they were in that comfort space that they lost sight of kind of their like divine right, or like they got too comfortable and they started allowing other cultures come and manipulate them. Like I'm pretty sure that's what he's alluding to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that these are direct descendants of the Jews from exile too. I'm pretty sure. It doesn't straight up say it, but
that would make a lot of sense. Like one of the biblical references that stood out to me was a note to the Duke that said, "A column of smoke by day, a pillar of fire by night."
Yep.
Like, yep.
Yeah, it's so many things, and that's also like why this might be like why I enjoyed so much. Like as I mentioned, is that the religious imagery in this is strong, and it's something sci-fi usually doesn't tackle. But he's taken in like, well, what are possible outcomes like if we are descendants of Earth, like when it comes to a religious answer? And he sat there and he combined certain religions, and then sat there and like, well, what's the unification of the religions looks like based on the Bene Gesserit guidance, and like setting everyone down to develop a single book and like looking at the commonalities for the people, and it's crazy.
All right. Is there anything else that stood out to you?
I feel like they talked about shields a lot in this book and how shields just don't work on Arrakis. Like we got it. Like, yes, we know they attract the worms. We would not be so concerned about shields if you didn't tell us about shields every chapter. Like it's cool that they exist, but like I just feel like it was one of those things that was just like, yes, there are shields. We get it. Especially because like we never see shields work. Like they're there in like the training duel, like before they arrive on Arrakis. But like other than that, like it felt like an interesting sci-fi beat that was like, oh, we need something cool sci-fi, shields. And then it's just like, oh, well, this is like super OP. So we need a way that this can't actually work on the planet. So, yeah.
Maybe it's important later in the series.
Maybe it is. You know,
I mean, it sounds like it's an important piece, like to the general culture, and then like just further emphasizing the harshness that is Arrakis. It's like even the most advanced piece of technology is useless here that we use for personal protection. I think that might be kind of a point, maybe. I don't know. But I don't know. There were some very interesting takes. Like, I think at one point they mentioned a palm reader. When I'm like 65 thinking about biometric scans. Interesting. Okay. Like, part of me keeps coming back to that this book was written in 65. I'm like, okay. What types of tech things are we seeing? Or like, I think it's cool that part of it is like, or that they did ultimately, despite space travel and everything, we developed a post-computer world.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting, and it's mostly like based on the development of computers or machines created in the image of man, and that becomes this kind of religious monocle that we don't do that.
And I also feel like we haven't talked about spice remotely enough during this, or how big of a part of the story spice is. But I feel like that kind of ties into this idea of like post-computer world, well, where your people are your computers.
Yeah, that's what the mentats do, and that's what navigators are specially bred to be able to handle the interstellar flight or travel. And there's an entire guild developed to doing that, and that's what costs so much money.
Yeah, because you get because basically,
and also why spice is so important is that navigators have to use a dose of spice to be able to perform their duties.
Yeah, because it lets them, like Paul explains, is like they get to see like a very limited distance into the future. So basically, it's almost like that force thing of like they can react quickly because they have a rough idea of what's about to happen, and that's how they are able to like. And it's very interesting that like again, instead of technology to do it, you just have these advanced people that are addicted to spice that are able to do it.
So that's how Han did it. Just kidding.
All right, with the new movie coming out on October 22nd, what are your hopes and expectations?
I'm just really looking forward to the sandworm scene. Actually, all the sandworm scenes.
Yep.
Is a big part of it. I think the duel with Janus is going to be very cool. I'm also looking forward to Paul being awkward with what's her name?
Chani.
Yeah. I have a feeling that initial interaction is going to be very awkward, and I'm looking forward to seeing that on screen. It's like, that's right. Remember that feeling for later on when you're a pompous jerk. Remember it. Remember how awkward you were. Please.
What about you, Shani?
I don't know. I'm kind of just excited to see the world at large. Like, I know it's just going to be a lot of sand, but
it's coarse and it gets everywhere.
Yeah, and all the characters, because like they're all so interesting, and like I just want them all to be good.
Yeah. Like
the premise of this feels very young adult, but this is very mature, and I really like that too. Like, I feel like if this was written now, it'd just be a very corny young adult book.
Yeah.
Let me throw a love triangle. Well, there is kind of one that's set up at the end, kind of.
But even then, it's not even like really a love triangle. It's
right.
It's a political marriage.
It's a political marriage. It's right, exactly. Whereas they full on, if this was written out, love triangle.
Yeah. My hopes, I want to see the Baron handled better. And then my other big hope is that I really want this movie to do well, because I'm sorry, I'm going to take from a later question. I really want to know more about this world. And like, I want an excuse to want to know more about this world.
Read the book. I'm just
Right, but I want us to have another book club so we can read the next book that
That's
the next
true.
movie is based on. Like,
I have a feeling I will have read it by then, though. Too. So that for that first question, have you read this book before? He's like, yes. I have a feeling they definitely will. Like, from my understanding, based on reviews, some people, which there's like a controversy about, like the IGN versus GameStop, GameSpot reviews, initial reviews. It's like you can tell one read the book and the other didn't, because it's like, oh, they're setting this, like they're doing this to try to set up a sequel. I'm like, yeah, because there's 4 other books. Like, there's
I mean, like, I don't know if it's accurate, but I did hear that basically the book or the movie does end like at the end of section 1, or like midway through section 2 kind of thing. And so, like, I don't know if that is accurate, but that's one of the things that I have heard. That, like, I mean, and you, like, Chris, you talked about the duel, and like with Jamis, like, from what I've heard, that might be like the end of the movie. I don't know if that's correct, but like, I was watching something and they were doing like a non-spoiler review because they saw it early, because it's out in other countries. It's just not like, it's one of those, and so they was out in their country, so they saw it, and so, like, the movie might end. I mean, granted, it all ties in with the end of the book, which is just this massive, and it's over, cut to black. But it might be a like more of a part 1 to Dune rather than a sequel.
Then
I've only heard it in one place, so I don't know if that's like accurate, but that is what I've heard.
Interesting. Either way, I want to do well. I know you're going to ask it later, but yes, I will read more books by this author.
Let's just do it now.
Yeah, and for me, this ties into what we've just discussed earlier. Like Emma had brought up, like Ready Player One and Ready Player Two, where like I felt that those books just try to force everything down your throat, and then there's even like parts that we joked about it in our Ready Player Two book club, where like Wade is making movies, and that's like a chapter of the book, and then like literally never comes up again.
It's like, why does this matter?
Like, but like. Almost this whole book feels intentional, like a story should. Shots fired, Ready Player Two. And I'm just very interested to see then once we take that intentionality out of just one book and now we're bringing it into this idea of a series, now what does that look like as you're expanding on those ideas and bringing that out into a bigger setting than just this one book?
Yeah. I too will probably read the rest of the Dune series at some point.
Race ya. No, I'm just kidding.
I think you're faster than I am.
Only if I get really into it, which this one actually did. I was really surprised. Also, speed reader app. Helped a lot.
All right. And our fun final question to end it all off. Choose your fighter, Dune style. What group would you want to be a part of?
I'm definitely want to be... I want to ride some worms, so... At the age of 12.
I want to be a Mentat, like Ravenclaw me. Let's go. Like,
just make sure you have good data, okay?
I mean, just like real life, you just have to have good data and things are a lot easier.
I'm going Bene Gesserit.
You just want to out Ravenclaw me.
Well, you couldn't be Bene Gesserit unless you're going to be the... It is all women, technically.
And Paul.
And then, well, Paul learns some of the ways. He's not part of the Bene Gesserit. He learns... So some of the Bene Gesserits, much like Yue, also learn some Bene Gesserit trainings through his wife. In this case, Paul was taught by his mom some of the ways, but they're not part of the Bene Gesserit, technically. So I couldn't be. Also, is it weird that they can control like things at the molecular level when?
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep.
I understand. I'd want to like it. I'd want to be Bene Gesserit too, but also sandworms.
Also,
Fair enough. All right. So, I guess go watch Dune on October 22nd.
that is the watch party on your
There's-
own. Go watch Dune.
And then come back and tell us what you thought.
Leave a comment down below after you've seen it.
And our next book club, which will be October 28th, will be Midnight at the Barclay Hotel by Fleur Bradley.
And now for something completely different.
Yes, this is a middle grade novel, so it's going to be a much easier read. I said that in the chat, Christopher.
I wasn't. I just agreed to Spoopy. I didn't know. Didn't pay attention to what was proposed.
Yeah.
Welcome to. So this is my brain. Okay.
Yeah. This
I
is
probably
a 1
read
hour
it,
of book club.
but
This
it
is
didn't
what you're
finally
reading now.
I
Chris
just
finally checked the notes for book club after a year. So I feel like we shouldn't have expected him to know what he was agreeing to.
I agree to most things. I agree to ideas, and Spoopy was a great idea. So that's what I agreed
Yes.
to.
I think it will be fun and spoopy. And
Time to tear it apart because it's well below our reading level.
yes, very different from Dune, but it will be fun. All right. Any final thoughts? We have said all our thoughts.
I also feel like we could go for another like 3 hours. I feel like there's so
Also
much
that.
we did not discuss
Like
on this
as
book.
yeah, like what we mentioned, we probably could have broken it literally by the individual books in the book, and did a separate book club for each of them. But it's just a lot. He's a lot.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for reading Dune with us. We are One Geek 411 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Remember to come chat with us at our Discord server, check out our Redbubble store, and shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Watch us live on Twitch and find our videos on YouTube. Rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out the show notes at our website, onegeek411.com. I'm the Hoot and Howl on Twitter and Hoot and Howl Tales, TALES, on Instagram.
I'm Hima Witzel.
And I'm not so foreign.
Read a book.
Ride a sandworm.